there. Welcome to Weather HQ. I'm Paolo del Rosario. This week, we're taking a deep dive into some crucial issues, from a groundbreaking new study on plastic chemicals to the increasing risk of jellyfish stings and PhilHealth's latest response to heat-related health concerns. Now, let's kick things off with a recent study from New York University that links phthalates, chemicals widely found in plastics, to serious health risks. Here's my interview with Ms. Marian Ledesma, zero waste campaigner from Greenpeace Philippines.
The study just adds to the larger volume of data and scientific evidence that we already have that's telling us that we must reduce plastic production and use, and we can't waste time on it. And like what you said, it's completely urgent, this issue, because when you look at plastics and the plastic crisis, you can see that it's not just an issue of health or environment. All of these are interconnected to other social justice issues, as well as other environmental issues, and even economic problems. You're going to see all these different factors come into play when it comes to the plastic crisis, because what we're seeing is that every stage of plastic's life actually has negative impacts on people, on our planet, and even on our climate. So there needs to be action from the government to protect people and start establishing alternatives to single-use plastic, because these are the only solutions that we can really see that will address the problem at source. We've given a lot of companies free pass for so long na kailangan rin na kumilos na nila. They have the resources and technology to create reuse systems so people actually have affordable, accessible, and safe alternatives to single-use plastic here in the Philippines.
You know, we're looking at what feels like a necessary cultural shift in terms of trying to educate the Philippine consumer against the use of single-use plastics. Is this, in your opinion, the biggest challenge that we have? Obviously, there's all the hurdle of mga legislation or yung mga restrictions when it comes to production in general. But from a consumer standpoint, culturally speaking, single-use sachets, in particular, single-use plastics, have been such a big issue in terms of the pollution that we have produced as a country so far.
Yeah, you're right. A cultural shift is definitely needed, but under all of it, it has to be, I think, underpinned by more systemic changes, and that really needs to come from policies and also corporate action. In the sense, people will choose single-use plastics because that's currently what's readily and available to them. But they really have no choice in the form of alternatives. Kahit gusto pa nila to avoid single-use plastics, they're still going to opt for that because that's just what's there in our groceries and our markets. So to really drive that cultural shift, there has to be regulations around it that will incentivize all of these businesses to provide those alternatives. There has to be incentives for the consumers to want to shift, and guarantee, of course, that all these alternatives that will be put in place to replace single-use plastic are affordable and fair for them, also safe, because whatever we're going to put out there commercially, it has to follow certain guidelines that will ensure that we're just not replacing plastic with another regrettable substitute, and also not replacing it with something that's equally disposable. And I guess one of the biggest challenges out there to these alternatives is really that are single-use plastics out there, so they're always going to be the choice. And they definitely need to be banned first. And then, of course, all of the framework of the policies na kailangan to ensure that alternatives will be more affordable and safe have to be there through legislation. The funny thing about culture is that Filipinos actually lived without single-use plastic, and we've had some reuse and refill practices that were already there.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, they were just co-opted and replaced with sachets. So if we can tap back into those past traditions and just modernize them to make them more convenient and accessible today, it really would be a safer and more environmentally friendly alternative.
You mentioned systemic change also needs to happen. When you take a look at the policies that you'd be lobbying for, or at least pushing as an organization, are there any pieces of legislation, any pieces of policy making that you are encouraging that hopefully be given more priority at the next given opportunity?
Yeah, for one, there can be a bill with different features that will enable reuse and refill systems in different sectors and for different applications. And reuse is actually very different from recycling, because with recycling, there's already waste that's
Hmm.
being produced. Reuse and refill systems are those systems that walang basura nagagawa. It's a zero waste model essentially, and it relies on making sure that you're reusing products and packaging again and again, but for the same purpose that they were made. And a bill that will enable reuse, as well as also mandate equivalent na reduction in plastic footprint of corporations is really what's needed. At ano yung laman ng bill na to? It should have targets for shifting away from single-use plastic, reuse and refill. There should be incentives for businesses engaging in reuse and plastic-free options, and also a measure to ensure capacity building and training for workers who will transition to a reuse economy. And Greenpeace and our partners in the Philippine Reuse Consortium are developing this policy framework, and we hope to really work with legislators who prioritize people's health and safety as well as environmental protection to create a goal. Kasi yung health at saka environmental protection, they're really one and the same goal, especially in terms of plastic pollution.
Yeah, we had this conversation because of the initial report, and I want to circle back to that. It's always been an environmental emergency when it comes to when talking about single-use plastics. But considering that there are now tangible deaths linked to the use of plastics, does that turn this into your mind a more health emergency right now and not just an environmental emergency? I know that we've always considered this a health emergency, but then it feels like the stakes have been amped up a bit, considering that there are not just a few deaths, it's hundreds of thousands of deaths linked to the use of plastic.
Yeah, 350,000 deaths in 2018 alone is pretty grave. And yeah, it definitely ups the stakes when you look at the problem now, because there have been so much data that even from the very beginning of plastics life, when you're extracting fossil fuels, there's already a lot of health threats that are being made with all the chemicals that are being used to extract fossil fuels. And then when you go through the whole production process, there's toxic emissions and pollutants being released. But this particular study just really cements all of these issues, because it's, as you said, quite tangible siya na link to everyday plastics and to these deaths from heart diseases. And hindi lang ito yung only na chemical that is hazardous when it comes to plastics. So phthalates are just one kind of chemical group that is being used in plastics, but actually there's over 4,200 hazardous chemicals that are being used in different kinds of plastics. So out of the 16,000 na ginagamit for plastic products, over 25% are actually considered dangerous, and there are no regulations around them in the sense that they're still being utilized. There's only some countries or different frameworks that will say you can use a certain amount of these chemicals, pero to say na wholesale na elimination in the use of plastic products, they're not out there yet. And again, I want to say that it's not just a health issue, because when you're looking at all of the health-related costs rin of using certain chemicals, actually just three chemicals, there's been studies that show that around $922 billion in the US alone lang yung naggagastos because of disease, because of disability and premature death
Yeah.
attributed to just three chemicals, and one of those is phthalates, the other is bisphenol A.
Coming up after the break, we talk about the health risks of jellyfish stings and what you can do to stay safe. Stay tuned. Weather HQ will be right back. And welcome back. You're still with us here on Weather HQ. I'm Paolo del Rosario. Now, with more people hitting the beach this summer, jellyfish, including the dangerous box jellyfish, are being spotted more frequently in Philippine waters. Now, to help us better understand the risks and safety measures, here's my conversation with Dr. Ted Esguerra of the Energy Development Corporation's Humanitarian Contingent.
When we talk about jellyfish, we have to note that they existed way back before humanity came in. Before we came into the picture, there's even a joke that a creature with no brain has outlived quite a number of species on Earth. And they're part of what we call it in the cycle of everything, in the circle of life. And it's their way of creating their defense mechanism, wherein they release some sort of nematocysts. These are stingers, actually, when a predator attacks them. And the tendency for us, because of the incursion of human, particularly in summer months, and most often than not, during warmer months, we have to note that they tend to proliferate because that's their breeding season also. So it depends on what hemisphere you are on Earth. But in this part of the region, they occur in warmer months because of the breeding season.
Doc Ted, we often see jellyfish floating near the surface. Is that because they're hunting or are there other reasons for this behavior? And may share ko lang, Doc Ted, because we had an interview with a marine photographer and naikwento niya na itong mga jellyfish pala, they don't avoid you. Kaya hindi katulad ng ibang marine life na lumalayo sila pag may tao. Ito palang jellyfish, minsan lumalapit pa. So how true is this?
Yeah, because they have tendency to go into a prospect. They don't have eyes and ears. They only rely on movement in the water. So if they can sense movement, perhaps they think, no, let me use the word think, perceive that it's a fish, because they are also a predator to certain marine animals like fish. They embrace, they use their tentacles to catch these little fish. They use stingers to paralyze them so that they can eat these marine animals. So they have the tendency, if they sense any movement at all. And because of the breeding season, they tend to go on the surface and in the shallow waters. That's why there is encounter with us, with the human population.
Doc Ted, we're all ready to hit the beaches, but before we hit the beaches, we want to know, are there any particular coastal areas or beaches where jellyfish are more prevalent? And is there a reason why they're more prevalent in those areas?
Well, the prevalence of the jellyfish depends on the availability of the other marine animals also, because they feed on fishes. And if we have like a area where there are, other marine animals, they tend to proliferate there, particularly in this breeding season. We have the 5th longest shoreline on Earth, and our way of looking at beaches is a combination of alley for fishermen, for fisher folks, and for tourist destination. We are not so much particular like in Bondi Beach, that is intended only for tourism. So we have quite a multiple tasking of our beach fronts. And there are quite higher tendencies for these species to proliferate. If we are to go to our destination, particularly this summer, we have to ascertain that the beach fronts and the tourist destinations must have first aid, I mean, must have lifeguard and safety induction because the owner or the property owner must have a way of clearing those beaches from hazards. For example, not only uh, jellyfish, but there might be sea urchin, there
Yeah.
might be corals, there might be other, like for example, if it's also a sea lane for for you know like near the beach, pier, there might be movement of other outboard motor which can hit a diver or a swimmer. So there must first be a safety cordon, and they can put barriers. No, it's like net for other animals not to come through.
Yeah.
Not only jellyfish, but other species or materials which can create harm.
Doc, when we're talking about the sightings, we're talking about yung prevalence sila na, and right now, some people are wondering whether or not yung climate change po nga ba is a contributor of the rising number of jellyfish sightings dito sa Pilipinas. We talked about the temperature being one of the reasons why there are certain breeding periods for these jellyfish. Is that the reason why na parang dumadami yung sightings of jellyfish in the Philippines?
Yeah, we can attribute to the changes of the landscape of the hemisphere, and one area is the rising sea temperature. Animals tend to migrate to areas where they can breed and they can proliferate. So way back before, there is not much sightings on box jelly. Of course, in Australia they have, and because of those changes which affect the ocean, our ocean in general, they tend to go out of the way. And we are now counting statistics of box jelly, and it's not really a good news after all because we are a sea people. Our economics are mainly from the sea. Of the 40,000 barangays, higher percentage are around we are in along the coastline. You have to imagine we have the fifth longest shoreline, so it affects also our relations to the sea if the sea has some sort of hazard. Now, there's nothing we can do, but we have to adjust. That is why the best way is to prevent it. Now, if there are sightings, where we educate our fisher folks of this kind of species, because there are lots of jellyfish and they look like the same, except for box jelly, they're a little bigger and the body forms like a box.
Yeah.
Unlike other jellyfishes, they are rounded and they're smaller. If we educate them, and if these farmers, these fisher folks can be part of the gathering of data. For example, we have lots of jellyfish in this area, so that our biologists and other marine scientists can do studies and weigh on how we can get away from it. Because this is not annihilating those animals, because they are part of the circle of life. We kill one, it affects other species down the line, which are also feeding on certain forms of animals. So our way is just to avoid. Actually, in the philosophical sense here, friends, we disturb lots of things in the environment.
Yeah.
And it's not because we are on top of the food chain and we just have to flaunt our being on top of it, that we just go to the beach, go to the mountains and explore.
Don't go away. Up next, we look into PhilHealth support for heat-related illnesses and maternal health services. Don't go away. Weather HQ will be right back. Hello again. Welcome back to Weather HQ. I'm Paolo del Rosario. With temperatures reaching dangerous levels, PhilHealth is stepping up through benefit packages for heat-related conditions. Now, to explain further, here's my interview with Dr. Israel Francis, Doc Ish Pargas, Senior Vice President for Health Finance Policy and PhilHealth spokesperson.
Well, for one, this is a new, not a new benefit, but rather we have been covering for illnesses or heat-related illnesses even before, and so we cover actually for heat exhaustion, heat stroke, or heat dehydration, wherein we already have a package for any confinement. But what is good also, Paulo, now is that we also have a new benefit package for outpatient emergency room benefit packages, wherein if the patient suffers for any heat exhaustion or any heat dehydration, and they are actually brought to the emergency room of all our accredited facilities, they can also get now new benefits, unlike before, when our benefits are really for confinement only.
Sir, bago lang po ba to?
Bago lang yung emergency room benefit package. It actually started February 14 of 2025.
All right, sir, let's go through the specific packages, benefit packages available for the heat-related conditions. So you mentioned heat stroke, dehydration, heat exhaustion. For those who are not too familiar with the packages that specifically would help in these type of situations, heat-related issues in particular, what are they for the benefit of our viewers?
Well, for our heat-related illnesses, we cover until for confinement, we cover until around 12,000 pesos. But for emergency room packages, it will be a package rate, but rather it will be paid for specific services that are being provided to our members. For example, if there are laboratories, if there are medicines, if there are supplies that are used in the emergency room, then they will be counted on and added up and will be paid separately. So it's a fee for service with a cap for our emergency room. However, for our benefit packages for confinement, it will be around 12,000 peso package.
Is this a separate summer-related coverage or package, or is it automatically applied to all current PhilHealth members?
It is applied for all. Actually, well, as stated in the Universal Healthcare Act, every Filipino is now a member. So even for those who are not yet registered, and once they suffered this heat-related illnesses, they can actually be covered by PhilHealth once they are brought in our accredited facilities.
Doc, let's go talk about, you mentioned a while ago yung emergency care benefit, outpatient emergency care, which you mentioned started last Feb 14. Of course, when we take a look at the nature of yung when this benefit would be applied, which is emergency, ER, some people might not realize, oh, ito pala yung kailangan kong dalhin. For those wondering how they can avail of this and what documents they should have prepared or at least ready for situations like this, what do they need to be able to avail of this?
Well, it would have been better if the patient or if a Filipino who are brought to the emergency room are actually registered already in PhilHealth.
Yeah.
But if not, it is not going to be a problem, because if they are brought to the hospital and not even registered, then they will be registered in the accredited facilities and they will actually get all the benefits also. Because part of the universal healthcare provision is that there is an immediate eligibility for every Filipino for the benefits of PhilHealth. So, pagdating nila sa emergency room at kung hindi sila member, then i-register sila at right there and then they can actually get the benefits. Kung ikaw naman ay miyembro na at nakaregister ka na, automatic i-deduct na yung ating mga benepisyo doon sa bill na babayadan ng ating mga pasyente.
Doc, obviously, this is not just in the Metro Manila area, or at least the metros. Yes. And I'm sure there are some people who are concerned, especially those who are in the rural areas or those worried about the informal sector. Is the coverage still as accessible to them as well?
Yes. Basically, actually, one of our priorities are the GIDA areas, or those which belong to the geographically isolated disadvantaged areas, because we know for a fact that access is a problem in those areas. But our accreditation people are actually trying very hard to make sure that all the facilities in all those areas are actually accredited. And we do accredit not just public facilities, but also private facilities, including hospitals and other healthcare facilities. And also, one of the priorities really of the government is to make sure that all those in the disadvantaged people, or those who are vulnerable, like the indigent, the senior citizens, the women who are pregnant, are actually members of PhilHealth. And so they are also priorities being provided by the services of PhilHealth. And just, Paolo, just to um, provide an information also, other than the emergency care and the confinement, we also have the primary care as provided by our consulta. So for any checkup or any consultation that does not need any emergency treatment or confinement, you can go to our primary care consulta providers for your checkup and free consultations with free laboratories and free medicines.
Well, Doc, we all know that all of this is not just seasonal, but of course,
Yeah.
we're all talking about this because they are all part of what PhilHealth is considering mga kumbaga summer health packages po nila. And part of the illnesses that are covered by this actually are illnesses that siguro not a lot of people would relate to summer being summer related, which is chickenpox, sore eyes, and even marine related injuries. Why was it important for PhilHealth to include it in yung package na po na to?
Well, just what you said earlier, it is very important for us to include all those. And these are not just, they are seasonal illnesses, but they can be covered any time of the year, because those are actually diseases or illnesses that can actually happen any time of the year. Then we are bound to cover, as provided by law, for us to cover any illness or disease that are affecting our people.
Well, just for those wondering, those who were actually afflicted by heat-related illnesses, there were 77 reported heat-related illnesses cases and 7 deaths back in 2024. So hopefully we can keep that number down or even lower. Another thing we want to move on to, Doc, is that this week marks Motherhood Week, Safe Motherhood Week, and that is obviously a big issue when it comes to certain sectors of our society. But can you give us an overview of PhilHealth's maternity benefits for expectant mothers and newborns as well?
Well, we actually cover for maternity care packages and normal spontaneous delivery and even the cesarean section. We cover for maternity care packages which are being provided in non-hospital facilities, no? So for non-hospital facilities, we actually pay for around 12,000 for maternity care packages. However, for those which are giving normal spontaneous delivery in hospital-based, we pay around 9,000 benefit package. But for those that will actually include, because we also cover for services for our newborn. So there is a newborn care package, and if all those services are provided in a non-hospital, we cover for around 15,000 peso package. But separately, for example, a newborn care package, which would include the newborn screening, newborn hearing, the first dose of Hep B injection, umbilical care, that is roughly around 5,000 peso benefit package. So we also cover for prenatal or antenatal services, especially in non-hospital facilities. We actually pay higher amount for a non-hospital delivery for maternity care packages, because this strategy actually encourages our pregnant women to deliver in non-hospital facilities to decongest the hospital from normal deliveries. As it is, this lying in clinics, non-hospital facilities, birthing home clinics are actually licensed also by the Department of Health, and they are being run by licensed midwife and in cooperation with OB-gynecologists.
Dokish, for those wondering, because we're running out of time, for those who want more information on everything that we have discussed when it comes to heat-related illnesses, when it comes to yung maternity care, how can they get the information online?
Well, they can actually call our 24/7 on hotline at 028-622-2588. They can email us at actioncenter@philhealth.gov.ph, or they can check our website at www.philhealth.gov.ph, or they can actually call this program, the Bilyonaryo, and surely they would get all the information.
And that wraps up this week's episode of Weather HQ. Catch us again next week right here on BNC, the Bilyonaryo News Channel. I'm Paolo del Rosario. Have a great weekend.